Welcome to another exciting podcast of Royal Oak Victory Church. We're glad you've joined us. We are a community devoted to God, connected to others, and influencing our world.
Well wrapped as well.
Yeah.
Nice decoration. Elastic band.
Elastic bands from Harvey Nichols, Dad.
Sorry, I spent it on myself. Gift collection.
Yeah, that's what the range is called.
Elastic band gift set.
Yeah.
Right.
Two? I got two. Oh. I do hope you haven't spent all your precious money on me, naughty boy. Paper clips.
Yeah.
Harvey Nichols.
Yeah, they're from Harvey Nichols, so, you know.
Harvey
I don't
Nichols?
think anyone's ever got you anything from Harvey Nichols
Wow.
before,
It's toothpicks.
You love toothpicks.
What is it?
It's a sink plug.
A little something for them, a bigger something for you.
So have you ever sat around on Christmas morning after all the presents have been opened and the wrapping paper is kind of strewn around the room, the thank yous have been said, and you just sat back and you observed those that were around you. And as you have spent that time observing, you've come to one of two conclusions. Either your haul is way bigger or way smaller than those that you're sitting with. And with that comes a whole bunch of feelings. Maybe it's joy and happiness, thanksgiving at receiving exactly what you wanted, all of your heart's desires. Or maybe it's a bit of jealousy over what others have received in comparison to your meager pile. Maybe you quickly realized that a box of elastic bands, paper clips, toothpicks, or a sink plug wasn't the best choice of a gift for your loved one. And now you're feeling a bit of guilt or regret at having left your Christmas shopping till Christmas Eve. Whatever it is, sadly, the feelings all tend to revolve around one common theme. And that is the gift-giving aspect that arrives at this time of year. At every turn, we are encouraged, we are prodded and poked, guilted and coerced into spending on those that we love. We have commercials and storefront windows. We have parties and songs and traditions, all focused on the singular aspect of showing your love for those around you through the giving of gifts. And while the concept itself is genuine, we can easily find ourselves consumed, not with the reason for the season, but instead the focus on consumerism and competitiveness and greed. The commercial we just watched less than subtly emphasized the fact that while you're out shopping and you're getting all those gifts for other people, don't forget to make sure you spend a little bit of money on yourself as well. And just to be clear, that was a real commercial. According to recent statistics, the United States retail industry generated over $3 trillion in business last year during the holiday season. That was on record sales of $620 billion. The sales total for the month of December accounts for 20% of the entire year's retail sales for business. And the average Canadian family is expected this year to spend $1,810 on Christmas. That's up 12% over last year on gifts, cards, postage, flowers, food, candy, decorations, travel, and of course the ever important Christmas tree. Gift giving alone is expected to increase 10% over last year, and you cannot chalk that up to just simple inflation. The fact is, we are spending more than we have in the past, and it's a trend that doesn't seem to be slowing down. In fact, the statistics show us that on average, when we look at the last major economic downturn in 2008, the spending at Christmas did not slow down. In fact, we were encouraged at Christmas through commercials to continue to spend and to spend more because it will help the economy. For many of us, this has created a Christmas season that is not just filled with an overabundant schedule, as we talked about last week, but also an expectation that we must enter the chaos of the malls. We must go to the stores. We must take advantage of the Black Friday sales online to fulfill the gift requests of everyone around us. Not just friends and family, but we've got to add the neighbors and the coworkers and that guy you met once. As a result, we are left with anything but a simple Christmas. And too often, we come out of the month of December more tired than we entered into it, missing completely the peace and the joy that are supposed to come with this season. It is with this motivation that we started a new sermon series last week we called Simply Christmas. Because it is so important that we approach this holiday with all its overcommitted, debt-ridden, lack of focus craziness with a more simplified approach. And in the case of today, we need to discover a practical approach to living a simple Christmas when it comes to our approach to money. For us as a church, this is imperative. It is not something that we simply come up here on stage and we talk about. It is not something that we hope will just catches on. But instead, we have codified it. It is part of our DNA. It is something that we strive for as a church. We unveiled it back in June, but one of our core values that deserves to be revisited today is that we as a church will faithfully steward our resources in a way that models the reality that we can be free, living a life of simplicity and generosity. It is a core value for us as a church, which means not just do we hold this as a staff, not just do we preach this from the stage, but instead, because we are members of this church, we should all hold this value within our lives. That means that all of us should endeavor to put it into practice, to work to achieve the freedom that comes when we get a better grip on our financial state. Getting an understanding of how this whole thing works, determining where our money goes and where it doesn't. And this is so especially true here at Christmas time because the money tends to slip through our fingers so much more at this time of year. And so with that in mind, if you have your Bibles with you, turn with me to 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, we're going to start in verse 3. If you're new to the Bible, you're going to find 1 Timothy about 3/4 of the way through the Bible. If you find Thessalonians, which is kind of the longest word within the books of the New Testament, you're almost there. And what we find here is that Paul, who's writing this letter to Timothy, he outlines some key aspects for us in regards to money. And so we're going to consider those this morning in light of Christmas. So starting in verse 3. It says, "Some people may contradict our teaching, but these are the wholesome teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. These teachings promote a godly life. Anyone who teaches something different is arrogant and lacks understanding. Such a person has an unhealthy desire to quibble over the meaning of words. This stirs up arguments ending in jealousy, division, slander, and evil suspicions. These people always cause trouble. Their minds are corrupt and they have turned their backs on the truth. To them, a show of godliness is just a way to become wealthy." Verse 6. "Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money, having wandered from the true faith and have pierced themselves with many sorrows. And let's skip down to verse 17. It says, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. So here we have Paul explaining to Timothy, who is a pastor of a church, how to teach his people about money. And so we're going to do the same thing this morning in the light of Christmas. Many of us are already well in the throes of it. Probably most of us have already started our Christmas shopping. I know some of us are probably hoping that that day doesn't come, but we're getting there. And so I want to challenge you this morning with some key questions. And the first question is this: what do I value? What do I value? One of the things that's interesting about this Christmas season is that in the midst of the chaos, we will eventually show what we truly value. For what we place our emphasis on, where we spend our money, and how we use our time is going to indicate that which is a priority to us. Too often, that means that our value at this time of year is not in the meaning of Christmas. Instead, we are caught up in the sensationalism that exists during the holidays. Every activity that is engaged in, every deed done, every word spoken is designed to fill our senses instead of our souls. The focus becomes that our physical well-being and our worldly possessions constitute our greatest good, our highest value in life. If I'm meeting my needs, my wants, my desires, then I have achieved what must be achieved in life. Now, when we put it as bluntly as that, it seems preposterous that we would ever hold that view. But when we look at our actions, they're not that far from the truth. So what is required of us this Christmas is to line up our values in the right order, to determine that which takes priority for us. Because where we place our value is where we are going to place our wallets. The staggering contrast is presented right here in the passage we just read from 1 Timothy. If we look at verse 5 and 6, it says, these people always cause trouble. Their minds are corrupt, and they have turned their backs on the truth. To them, a show of godliness is just a way to become wealthy. And then we see verse 6. Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. And so when we put our value on our wealth, we end up in ruin. It is only a matter of time. But when we place our value on the more important things in life, we set ourselves up for success. Now, whether we like to admit it or not, we are only 11 days removed from Christmas. Just under halfway through the month, over halfway our way to Christmas already. And so what we need to do is pause and ask ourselves for a moment some very important questions. Things like, what have I spent my money on this Christmas? And more importantly, on whom have I spent my money this Christmas? Have I purchased that what was only necessary? Or have I splurged at some or even every opportunity? And do I have control over my finances this holiday season, or do they control me? There is still time this month to adjust our priorities, to remember why we celebrate Christmas in the first place, to adjust that which we put our value on, and in turn to value the important things in the days to come. And instead of being so focused on what we are giving and what we are getting, we can simply enjoy the company we are keeping. And once we have our values lined up, we have our priorities refocused, maybe if they've been off a little bit or off a lot, we then can ask ourselves the next question that is presented here from 1 Timothy. how am I keeping simplicity? How am I keeping simplicity? Now, earlier this week, I was listening to the morning news as I was getting ready for work, and one of the guests came on specifically to talk about eliminating stress during this time of year. Now, she outlined the things that you would come to expect, that we need to eliminate stress because there are some health concerns that obviously come when we let stress linger. The other thing that was interesting to note is she mentioned that that Christmas is the second most stressful time of year behind tax season. I don't think those two should go in the same sentence, but they do. But what really caught my attention was the fact that she said the number one cause of stress during the Christmas season wasn't the guests coming to town. It wasn't the parties that we had to go to or to host. It wasn't even the busyness of the schedules that we keep. Instead, it was all on the issue of money. And she made one key statement that I found baffling, and I've been kind of contemplating it all week, realizing the truth of it the more I think of it. And she said that we are now living in a society that thinks it is a foreign concept to stop spending money when the money runs out. Instead, people continue to spend once their savings run dry, and no sooner do they run dry that they pull out that piece of plastic and they just keep going. They have to feed that need, that consumerism, that desire for what we want and that greed. In fact, consumer debt is considered to be the biggest danger to our economy, both from the Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada. According to the statistics I was able to find for Canada, over 91% of Canadians hold at least one credit card. 58% will hold more than one, and in fact, the average number of credit cards that we hold is 3. That means that for those of you that hold only 0 or 1, that means that we are talking just as many people that are holding 5 or 6. That's staggering. In fact, our personal debt load now sits, and this is as of November, at 163.6%. To give you an idea what that means is for that every dollar you earn, you owe somebody else $1.64. That type of pace cannot be kept up. We are now at record and dangerous levels, and that only continues to escalate, especially at this time of year when we spend and we spend and we spend. What was really staggering was the fact that there was a study released by Manulife Financial just last week where they surveyed quite a number of Canadians, and they said, what do you consider to be debt? If this is such an issue, what's the problem? Well, as they looked at this, they realized that 27% of Canadians don't consider mortgage a debt. Even more worrying than that, 23% of Canadians don't consider car loans debt. A loan is a debt. That's standard business accounting. So that means a quarter of our population here in Canada either doesn't understand basic financial concepts or is deluding themselves. Right? And what that is causing is that we are becoming more financially illiterate, and we are going to have more and more problems in the future, not just personally, but as a nation. At the very heart of consumerism and the debt that then accumulates because of that is the sense of dissatisfaction and discontentment with what we already have. Advertisers know this so well, and they just lie in wait, right? They know exactly which commercial to put on TV or in the movies, which product placement to put, what poster to put up, how to place things on shelves in a store. If you ever want a very interesting talk, listen to somebody teach about marketing and product placement. There's a reason chocolate bars are put at the front of the store as you're going through that line, right? You're hungry, you're tired, it looks cheap, I'll just add it to my pile. Right? And we do. Everything is designed to make us think that we need something more, something better, and something bigger than we currently have. And that just speaks of a life without simplicity. Thus, our greatest key in countering the culture is to live a simple life. It's to live content with what we have. Now, we stated it as our core value, and so it should be something that we're working towards, as hard as that may be. Practically, what this means is that you need to go into the Christmas season and the shopping that you have to do with a plan, knowing in advance how much you're going to spend and whom you have to purchase for. And it's not good enough to just have a plan. You then have to stick to that plan. Budgeting should be done for every aspect of life, but it is so much more important to have it in mind when we venture into the pressure of the stores and the sales and the online purchases. Without that plan firmly in place, things can very quickly get out of hand. And I can know this from my past. Up until a few years ago, until my wife set me straight, I had a very good plan that I would never follow. So at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of the Christmas season, I would go, all right, this is who I need to purchase for. This is how much I'm willing to spend on each person. And I would wander into the stores knowing exactly what I wanted to do. But it wouldn't take very long for me to see everything and to start making excuses of why I could go off budget just this once. Right? See if these sound familiar. Oh, I know it's not what they asked for, but they will love the upgraded one so much more. It's not that much more money. Or, it's the perfect gift. I know it's way out of my price range, but I can't wait to see the smile on their faces on Christmas morning. Husbands might get this one. I love my wife, and I know getting her this gift will show that love. I know we can't really afford it right now. I'm just going to put it on the credit card, and we'll figure out how to pay for it in January. These excuses may be loving. They may be genuine. We may desire to bless and to give to those that we love. But very quickly, it leads us out of simplicity. Right? Not only that, it leads us into debt, which is the exact opposite of what we are trying to accomplish. Looking back at our passage here from 1 Timothy, Paul outlines in verse 6 through 8 the same idea. He says, "Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content." And the thing is if you dig into this verse a little bit deeper, you look at the word content, it can also be translated to mean sufficiency in Jesus Christ. Meaning that the only way for us to be truly content in life is to put our sufficiency in Him instead of in the almighty dollar. Paul exhorted the church at Philippi in the same way when he wrote his letter to them. Philippians 4:11-13 says, "Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me." And we often take that last verse completely out of context. Right? We look at the fact that we're going through a struggle or we're going through a difficulty, and we go, "God, you can do all things because you strengthen me." And what he's talking about here is money and contentment. In his book, Advent Conspiracy, Can Christmas Still Change the World? Author Rick McKinley writes, "We are constantly searching for the one thing that will satisfy us. Yet each time we trust the promises of our possessions, more barriers are raised between our true selves and God's plain command to love Him above all things." The gifts are nice, the smiles are great, the thankfulness is appreciated, and the loving gestures are all well and good. But we have to be careful. We need to ask ourselves whether it is worth it in light of the need for simplicity this Christmas. And I'm not telling you that you can now go to your husband or your wife and go, "You know what, I'm off the hook, I don't have to buy a present this year." go back to your plan and make sure you keep to it. Discuss, right? Go, are we going to spend $100 this year, and keep to it? Right? This does not let you off the hook. But we need to be smart about it. It's a choice we have to make. Are we going to be consumed by the consumerism, or are we going to be satisfied with the simplicity? And then that leads us to our third question, is that, am I living a life of generosity? When we look back at our core value, it states that we are to be a model. Now, the way to be a model, which means that we have to sit ourselves apart from culture and a desire for others to be like us. It means that we have to be doing something we're not doing already. We have to be countercultural. The actions of our church, and in that case, the actions of each and every one of us, should set us apart from the culture in which we live, so that it causes others to look at what we are doing. And not just because we are doing something different, but because we are successful at what we are doing. History remembers the innovators. We know exactly who Alexander Graham Bell was. We know who Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. We know who Henry Ford and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were, because they stood apart from society and said that they wanted to see and do things differently than the way things were being done before. And if we observe the culture of our Christmas season, it is operated on the need rather than the want to have something we don't already have. So to run countercultural to that standard, to do the opposite, to stand apart, to be different, means that we have to be generous. We have to give away to those that actually need it. Well, based on the statistics, those that contribute to charities on an annual basis has fallen to just 23% of the population. And that is a 23% decline from 1990. And many news reports over the last couple of weeks have been touting the fact that Canadians are incredibly generous, right? Giving $8.5 billion to charities in the most recent statistical year, which was 2011. I mean, that is a big number. That is incredibly generous. But when we break that down, when we look at who's giving, a large portion of those contributions are coming from the extremely wealthy. And in fact, when we look at the average, giving to charities has not increased at all since 1984. The most telling statistic is that Canadians are giving less than 1% of their income to charity, and that the average Canadian will give only $125 a year away. In other words, what we are seeing is a steady climb in consumer spending, accompanying debt load, and a slow and steady digression in the amount that is being given away. People's values, those things that they see as vitally important, are changing. And generosity now is becoming a tax tool of the wealthy instead of an obligation of the masses to help those less fortunate. Now, the purpose of this isn't to guilt you into giving to ROVC. In fact, we are already countercultural. This core value sits within us because of exactly who we are. We have bucked the trend. We have seen a steady increase in giving year after year after year, and it's not just because we're seeing more people attend church. People are giving more. You guys are a generous people. But what I am trying to get across is the idea of generosity itself is a foreign concept to the culture in which we live. In the face of consumerism and materialism, we are confronted with continually during this Christmas season. People are they're spending it instead of giving it away. And if we are to turn against this trend, if we are to show what we practice in here out there, to make Christmas simple when it comes to our money, we need to be a generous group of people. Now, looking back at 1 Timothy, if we look at chapter 6, verse 17 to 19, Paul writes, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience true life. And so, as with our first two questions, we need to determine what we value, and we need to take a look at our budget and determine not just how much we are going to give in terms of gifts to those that we love, but we need to actually budget in how much we are going to be generous during this season. When we hold a tight grip on our money, even if it's in the sake of simplicity, we show very clearly who we are trusting for its provision and how we are going to deal with the overflow. See, God asks us to trust him in all things. All things includes money. That means the one thing that causes us probably the most stress in our lives, we've got to give him control over that. In fact, Jesus outlined very clearly that our actions show where our value lies, and our actions show that who we are to the very core. In his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6:19, he says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal." And then here in verse 21, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So to wrap up this morning, I want to ask you the most immediate question that comes from this teaching of Jesus. Where is your treasure? Where is your treasure? Where is your heart this Christmas? Where are you placing your value this Christmas? If your values are lined up in the right place and you're living a life of simplicity and generosity, then you don't have to worry as much. You can navigate the confusion of Christmas easily, and you're probably already in a state of simply Christmas. But if you have found yourself confronting the reality this morning that you have very little control over your finances this year, if you have any at all, then I want you to do one very important thing. And that is to remember what Christmas is really all about. It's a celebration of the greatest gift of all, Jesus Christ, given to all humanity to save us from our sins. Really, Christmas is about the start of the journey. We focus in a lot on Christmas and Easter being the end of the journey, but we have to also remember that there was 33 years in there. 3 years of incredible teaching that applies to our lives, that changed the world and can continue to do so. Not only that, there are teachings within that we recognize here at Christmas as being influential within our own lives. And the only way that you're going to get a grip upon Christmas, to really get a grasp upon your money, is to realize that Jesus was the reason for the season. He needs to be your focus. He needs to be the one that you come in and say, you know what, God, I don't have control over my finances. I need your wisdom. I need your guidance. Right? And it is a struggle. In fact, one of the things that because we see this as a core value, is we have a class that we teach called Financial Peace, and we will be launching that in January. And it is a way for you to be able to get a better grip with God's wisdom on your finances as you start the new year. But to be able to do that, it means you've got to invite Jesus in. Some of us, maybe we've been Christians for a while. We know we've got Jesus in our lives. But when we entered this December, it just meant confusion and chaos and craziness. And we've let this whole idea of simple Christmas and the focus go completely out the window. And we've bought the gifts and we've gone to the parties, and then all of a sudden Christmas morning we realize, wait a second, there's actually a story behind why I've been doing this for the last 25 days. And if you've never accepted Jesus Christ into your life, I would encourage you to do so today. That needs to be your first step. That is the only way that you're going to be able to come to grips with what Christmas is all about. And so I want to encourage you, maybe you're not even ready to make the decision yet today. We have a package that we call our Yes Package. And it has very vital information on how to start that journey off right. You can grab one for me at the end of the service. You can stop by our guest center. We'd love to be able to give one of those to you to start that journey. Because you see, in the grand scheme of things, there really isn't a need for the tinsel and the decorations. There really isn't a need for the gifts and the food. But when we've got the ability to celebrate the greatest celebration of all, if we can do it with the right value, with the right simplicity, with the right generosity, we're going to do it with the right reason this Christmas. In fact, this celebration was so great that if you look at the Christmas story, the angels themselves, heaven could not contain them. And that they sang with their voices, praised Hosanna in the highest to those shepherds, because of the celebration of what that first gift meant. And as we celebrate our Savior's birth, let us do everything in a way that honors him. Not just the reason he came, which is so very important, but also his teachings as well. Let us remember that the value is in keeping those dearest to us closest to us. It is in living simplicity instead of the chaos. It is in giving generously instead of hoarding. Because if that is our focus, then in the overflow of that joy, because when we realize what Christmas is, when we get that simple Christmas in our lives, that joy is going to overflow, and we're going to have the best Christmas we've ever had.